Friday afternoon, everyone. I'm Zach Keeney, joined with Matthew Fish. Welcome to another MSP Cyber Roundtable. Make sure to like us on LinkedIn and check out our educational YouTube video. Today we have Yazmin, Hernandez, and Hadyn Peffer.
Yep.
From Sainik. We're going to have a conversation about MDR versus XDR and also MGM. And if anybody has any other exciting groups of letters that they want to put out there, we can probably cover those things as well. So we'll do full introductions here in a moment, but how you guys doing? What are plans for the weekends? Everybody tell me your favorite dessert, all that good stuff.
Hadyn, you want to go first? Sure. Sorry, Matt.
I'm going
go
first.
For it.
Any of those things are good to
Any of them.
Any
Okay,
of it.
I'm Hadyn Peffer. I'm marketing lead here at Sainik. This weekend I have a soccer game tonight, which I am recovering from a broken arm from my last soccer game, so it's a little anticipated this evening. So I'm excited.
How long ago was the last one?
Like 3 weeks ago.
You broke your arm 3 weeks ago and you're already back at it?
Yeah.
Very,
gonna try at
impressive.
least. Gonna give it my all. And then my favorite dessert is s'mores. Anything s'more related.
Is it because of the marshmallow, or like what's the?
It's the flavor combo of the graham cracker, the chocolate, and the s'more. Like if there's like a variation of a s'more at any restaurant, I have a vow that I need to get it.
Have you ever?
So I don't have s'mores frequently, but I have variations of them very frequently.
You ever use a Reese's?
I have not actually, but I love Reese's.
Well, there's a variation for you. And with Halloween coming up, wow, how timely.
I know.
All right, you're up, Yazmin.
Okay, so weekend plans, maybe drive to the mountains here in Colorado, go see some fall leaves, and relax, hopefully. Favorite dessert is going to be pineapple upside down cake. That's my favorite.
Is it because of the pineapple, or do you just prefer cakes?
So, do you know a pineapple upside down cake, Zach? Have you made this before?
I'm not a big pineapple guy.
It's an outgrowth of the 1950s, and it's like one of the most complicated cakes to manufacture. So I've counted. It takes 11 separate bowls to make a pineapple upside down cake.
You're very educated on this.
Oh yes, I've made these before. And you're not allowed to use a machine. You have to fold everything by hand. All the ingredients have to be folded, and if you're not gentle enough, the whole thing will collapse. It's
because of the meringue, the whipped meringue.
But yeah, the texture of the cake is really what gets me. Not so much the pineapple, but the texture and the flavor profile.
So it's the upside down cake part. It is.
So
it is the other part. That's interesting.
And you can make it with other fruits. It doesn't have to be a pineapple. But
that's true. I didn't expect you to be so knowledgeable on.
I love
Become
baking.
prepared.
I love baking. Anyway, weekend plans. So it's leafer season here, I live in the beautiful peak foliage. So I'm like 2 hours north of New York, which also means I'm 2 hours west of Boston, and I don't know. It seems like there's like 3 million people trying to get out and see the leaves for this like 2 or 3 week period.
Mm-hmm.
And so what this means is if I leave the house, it doesn't matter where I go, grocery store, gas station, forget trying to go someplace like a hotel or some event. It's like a mob scene.
It's what it's like here on the 70 in Colorado.
So usually I like go out and I try to just like walk around in nature because it's beautiful, it's colory, and all the trees are dying, and that's why they're beautiful. But it's raining, so I'm just gonna sit at home and stare at the rain.
That's good too. There's a good Blind Melon song about that.
So we're a few minutes in here. I think we should do quick intros here. I'm founder at Fort Mesa. And we're helping service providers sort of own their cybersecurity roadmaps for them and their clients' futures. You guys want to do quick intro?
You could do a little about your backgrounds and then do a little bit of depth on Sainik would be great.
Sure. So I am a manager here at Sainik. I work with account management, sales, as well as marketing. And then I do a little bit of assistance with just liaising the SOC with our customers. I could provide a ton of background on Sainik, but before I do, I want to let Hadyn introduce yourself.
I think I gave myself I jumped early and did a little introduction prior to the weekend plans. But yeah, I work with marketing team here at Sainik. I've been here for about 11 months now. New to the world of cybersecurity, but learned a ton in the past 11 months. So excited to speak about it today.
Great, thanks. And I'm Zach Keeney, channel sales director with Fort Mesa. Prior to my time in cybersecurity, I grew up in the restaurant industry, executive development program at a large brand, and then owned my own franchise for about 2 years. So I have a people development specialty, which is great because people are everywhere. And learning cybersecurity at a high level, getting a master's at University of DePaul. So closing that gap and helping drive things forward here.
Lovely.
Shall we dive into controls?
Yeah, let's do it. So today we're going to review CIS Controls version 8, Control Group 17. Control Group 17 is incident response and management. It's towards the end of the list when you've done just about everything you can to protect your castle. You need to just realize and understand that incidents will happen, attackers will breach your defenses, and you need to be prepared to respond to that. So that's what this control group's about. Like other CIS controls, we have a control category, incident response management, which has a few sub-controls. It actually has 9 sub-controls. And like other CIS controls, those sub-controls are distributed across 3 control groups: Implementation Group 1, 2, and 3. Implementation Group 1, or IG1, is a group of best practices in incident response that's recommended for every single organization on the planet. You are not doing cybersecurity in a formalized or coherent or comprehensive way if you are not doing these things in IG1. If your organization doesn't depend solely on off-the-shelf software, if you have any IT staff, if you have any business line applications beyond, say, Office 365 or QuickBooks Online, right? If you have any custom business or business line applications, or your business touches regulated data, or failure of security at your organization could impact human safety, any of these things, as well as if you if you're high risk to your customers, if a security failure would really damage your business or your customer's business, you're going to need more than that IG1 control group. You're going to need implementation group 2. And for a subset of those that I just talked about, the highly regulated customers, the customers that maybe have federal contracts, maybe you're in healthcare, maybe a failure could impact human safety, which could be, clearly we know about critical infrastructure. We think of healthcare as critical, as impacting human safety, but also remember that, even construction sites these days use very large machines with digital remote controls. So
you mentioned something.
Yeah.
This is slightly unrelated, but you mentioned on a call this week that sometimes in situations where you may be manufacturing a building for something that is responsible for health and in human safety.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Have responsibilities there as well, which I thought was
it's not necessarily a direct impact. It could be that a failure in your security has an indirect impact to human safety, right? Even like
somebody's got the blueprints to the building and they know exactly how to
Yeah,
Whatever.
or let's say your job is putting things in boxes and you happen to put the wrong drug in the wrong box, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so
Bad too.
um, yeah, you can be a little expansive in definitions there, and you should be. Just really think about what would be the impact. So you need to figure out that impact to understand how you deal with incident response and management in your organization. But at the very basic core is 17.1, 2, and 3, and I'm going to go through those real quick. So in implementation group 1, it's required that you first designate personnel to manage incident handling. So what that means is that your organization, before the incident has happened, has named not just theoretical people like the IT department, specific people like Zach Keeney or Matt Fish or Hadyn are going to be in charge of incident management, incident handling. And different people may have different roles. One person may be in charge of notifying customers, another person may be in charge of receiving reports from the larger organization. The point is that you designate those contacts as being individual people in advance. 17.2, establish and maintain contact information for reporting security incidents. I just sort of mentioned that. Um, not only do you need to have a person who's in charge of receiving those incidents, you need to make sure that you've distributed that to all the people that might report an incident. So everyone knows exactly who is supposed to be reported to in the case of a security incident. Um,
So
this isn't because, yeah,
you mean to tell me that it's not enough just to write my name in a document somewhere and then file it?
yeah, I mean, clearly, we need to make sure people have read it or they know they've been trained on it. But there's nuance here. It's not enough, and I've seen this a few times where the incident did make it up the tree where it needed to go, but if it takes a roundabout like turn through like two of the wrong desks to get to where it's supposed to go, that could add 2, 3, 4 days if there's a weekend, right? And that's why it's important to have a designated handler, a designated reporting process, so that we don't wait 2, 3, 4 extra days
Or if
when you
somebody's
tell your
bad at email, which is, I
yeah
mean, some
yeah it
people
could get
are
lost completely,
like,
right?
it's a good point.
So 17.3, and this rounds out what's needed in implementation group 1. Establish and maintain an enterprise process for reporting incidents. Okay, so we've named who's gonna be the incident handler. We've figured out what their contact information is, and we've published it. But what's the actual process? Is it that they go and fill out a form? Do they write it down on paper? Do they call this person on the phone? Figure out what the designated method is, right? And turn it into a process, specific contact information, specific person to be contacted, right? Um, that's something every single organization should have in place. And if you're a service provider and you have a bunch of small business customers, you need to do this for every single one of them. Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
You probably have other processes that are in place for this type of thing as well. For instance, in my former life, drivers would get into car accidents, and if you were a new general manager that didn't know who to call, is a nightmare. It's a nightmare. What do you do in the same situation? It's this. I'm sure there's similar processes for
All sorts
other
of things in a
elements of your
business. Yeah.
business, and this is the same thing. You got to have
Yeah.
a full built out process there.
Yeah, and it's important if you're a service provider to recognize that if your job is to secure the customer, then your job is not to tell them to report security incidents the same way they report like my printer is jammed, right?
Yep.
Because it's going to go to a totally different queue and be treated like at a different level of priority and urgentness, right?
Great.
All right, so let's talk about the implementation group 2 controls, and this is where the meat of like the depth is in Center for Internet Security's control group for incident management. These are things that if you're an organization that needs to protect confidential data, you have business line applications, you're not just using SaaS, right? You might have servers, you might have custom software. You've got IT people touching the organization on a weekly basis, maybe daily basis. There's some extra things that should be done to really stop the risk of attack. So 17.4, maintain a full incident response process. So this isn't just about reporting incidents. it's also go beyond that and detail, well, what happens after people report it? Do we, and I'm not, there are things you might want to think about there. Like, for example, do we determine the size? Do we expand the group? Do we circle other people in? Do we notify customers? But put that
Third-party
plan in
vendors,
place.
maybe.
Third-party vendors, maybe. Yeah, it depends. It depends. And so that's why someone needs to sit down and plan this in advance. Figuring it out on the fly is not what you want to do, because
Right.
all that thinking you're doing on the fly is taking away from handling and dealing with the situation. So do that in advance. 17.5, assign key roles and responsibilities. So we already sort of said, well, we should have an incident, someone who receives the incident report. But let's go beyond that and say, well, maybe someone's responsible for the full life cycle. Maybe someone's responsible for restore, and a different person's responsible for forensics. Maybe a different person's responsible for talking to customers, right? Maybe there's a regulator involved. Identify all those people in advance, right? Assign all those key roles. 17.6, define mechanisms for communicating during the incident response. This is really important. People are going to be talking on different channels during an incident. What if one of those channels has been compromised? What if one of those channels is down? It's really important that this has been thought through in advance, and that everyone knows, oh, this is an incident communication. I'm going to use this designated channel. This is particularly in the, there was some high profile attack we're going to get into later, but it's particularly important when you have an attacker that may take advantage of confusion in an organization when systems are down to insert information that may be confusing. And if everyone knows what channels they're supposed to be communicating in, there won't be any attackers, adding to the problem via, text messages, emails, etc. That, maybe there's a designated system for this. I'm going to go to the next page here. And 17.7, conduct routine incident response exercises. Now, if you've really built this machine in your enterprise, you're actually going to have no problem doing 17.7, because incidents happen, right? People type in their password in the wrong box. People click on the wrong link. People leave their phone behind, right? All sorts of things happen. Most of these incidents turn out to be relatively low impact. And if you're exercising your incident response function during these low impact incidents, you'll be prepared for a major impact incident. However, once in a while, you should probably sit down, if you've only had minor impact incidents, and talk about, well, what would we have done in this situation if the impact had been greater? What if we hadn't caught it in time? What if it had been Jerry instead of Jane, right? How would we have done that differently? Or even, if you're going to do a big tabletop exercise, get all your stakeholders, your business stakeholders together once a year, and set up tabletops where we talk about all the theoretical situation that could happen. And do we have the resources in place to handle situation X, Y, and Z? Do we need an incident responder, like an external incident responder on retainer, right? Have those exercises performed, and they can be theoretical, right? But I love the real world, doing routine incident response as a method of exercising that muscle, right?
Yeah.
And the last one in the just about any organization that has their own IT or has custom business application group, IG2, 17.8, conduct post-incident reviews. So when the incident is done, right, when it's closed, when it's handled, who is picking up the pieces and doing the after action, the retrospective lessons learned? Well, we did this really well. Well, we did this not so well. Well, this we totally failed on. How can we do that better next time, so that you can improve those processes? Again, you should not be finding out that your incident response process is broken when you have your first major incident. Now, if you've done all of those things, you'll want to get, and you're working out those muscles on a regular basis. That leads to 17.9, which is maintaining security incident thresholds. So I just mentioned how there are some situations that may be higher in impact than other situations. And so what would make sense in most organizations is to come up with different playbooks that are enacted based on different different thresholds, right? Some of these incidents are going to turn into 24/7, like all hands until they're solved, right? Like a major incident. And some of them are just going to be like, oh, I'll handle this on Monday, right? And really defining
I love
what,
those types of things.
yeah, when they can wait till Monday.
Yeah, those are great.
How bad does it have to be? What situations need to be met where the situation's upgraded, right? And you might think of these as small, medium, large incidents. So anyway, that's CIS Controls, incident response and management, broken down into 9 parts. And I think for most organizations, this is a great way. To really handle the reality that incidents will happen. This is going to take most of the risk off the table. If you are an organization that has extremely high risk or extremely low tolerance for impact, you may find that this is not enough, and you need to retain that outside responder. But you will find that out when you go through these exercises. You will find those gaps, and you will determine you need those outside resources. So I think that's it for CIS Controls for the day. I mean, I can't share very specific incident response scenarios, but I will say that I've run into situations where organizations have failed at all 9 of those things, or some subset of them. This is basic stuff that really does take most of the risk off the table. But it's also something that will only function effectively if you've done all the other 16 security areas before you get to this one. Because frankly, if you had no security castle in place, right, and you go to try to do incident management, you will find it's a very heavy, unwieldy process. Like, you'll be doing it every day, right? It's good to really only kick in these processes when you've already prevented every preventable attack. You guys have anything you want to add here before we get into topic of the day? I mean, we're actually have sort of related topic space, but
I know, I was going to say this directly is in line with the MGM stuff that's been happening.
Yeah, we try, but it doesn't always line up that way. So today's all about incident detection. I'm gonna just throw the topic that we're talking today. Here we go. Today's incident day. We're talking about MDR. We're talking about XDR. We just did the CIS Control for incident response. We're going to talk about what happened with MGM a few weeks ago, and they're still cleaning up over there, believe it or not. MDR versus XDR. Does anyone want to like take a stab at a definition? Zach's like, not me.
I could take a stab. I do want to preface our definitions by saying, the controls you just went over are really what you want to have in place once a breach or an incident has actually happened. The tools and technology we're talking about today, MDR and XDR, are really the tools that you would have as the proactive defense. It's not really related to the actual incident response management or the forensics and investigation that occurs when a breach happens. So with that in mind, I think there are some varied definitions of MDR out there. So I'm going to try to start with some common denominators between them. MDR services or solutions really aim to provide organizations with access to reliable and consistent security operations center services, or SOC services. These functions enable organizations to assess, identify, respond, and proactively address security threats through disruption and containment measures. So that's my rough, quick and dirty definition of MDR.
So and you're right, it is proactive, but only from the perspective of it's the thing that happens before the incident, right? So you don't know you have an incident unless you've detected it. In some cases, people report it. In absolute worst case scenarios, the attacker knock on your door with a ransom. But ideally, you'd have tools in place that would detect the breach, the incident before it's reached sort of impact stage, right? So detect and respond tools, or any collection of sensors that can detect in an automated way or a semi-automated way, or sometimes in a fully human way, detect what's going on in that environment, note that it's an anomaly, raise it to the point of a human who can then look at it and say, oh yeah, this is an incident, declare the incident, right? And that's when the incident response process we just went through kicks in. MDR, and you're totally right. I mean, these are marketing words, right? MDR, XDR. There's other DRs out there. Generally, there's EDR, right? Generally, EDR, endpoint detect and response, is a word we use to refer to anti-malware solutions. We used to call these things antivirus, and we stopped using that label because virus is not an expansive enough term, and also antivirus softwares traditionally, the traditional definition is that there's a signature of known attack code that it's looking for, and today's anti-malware solutions go beyond that, and they look for modes of behavior on the endpoint that they're programmed to recognize. It's not always a specific piece of code that it's looking for. And what makes it managed, that's because this is managed detect and response, is that someplace there's a human involved.
Right. That was a really key distinguishing factor you mentioned.
Someplace there's a human involved. Although, and not all the MDR products will tell you this, sometimes the human involved is you. So ideally, MDR comes with a human that does some pre-analysis and only flags something to you if it's a impacting incident or it's likely to become an impacting incident. But some of the software out there labeled MDR tickles out an alert, sends it to a technology team that then has to evaluate it and say, oh, that's a normal thing or that's a bad thing. But in either case, MDR isn't truly MDR if there's not a person someplace. Go ahead, Zach.
So what is the M and the X and then the DRs stand for?
Okay, so
thank you.
Hey and I are on the same page.
M is managed, which means there's a person involved. Okay. And the difference between EDR and MDR is there's a person in there someplace.
Okay.
And then detect and respond. So first you detect and then you respond. So it's the managed person who takes the detection and turns it into a response. Okay. If there's no person involved, it's not MDR, even if it says MDR on the tin.
What is the
you might be the person, and if you're not doing the thing, it's not MDR.
Yes.
So the second thing, the X, there was a few, like, these definitions have gelled a little bit over the last few years, but XDR is a more expansive word to distinguish from, so just in its basest form, XDR is MDR, okay? However, MDR was basically stolen by the EDR industry, right? And XDR denotes that it goes beyond the endpoint. So in an MDR system, we're taking endpoint detections. These are anti-malware solutions on end machines, laptops, sometimes phones, servers, right? Things with operating systems, Mac, Windows, Linux, right? These are endpoints, and they have software on them, anti-malware software that detects a thing, a bad thing, behavior-based, maybe based on MITRE, or maybe the attack framework that defines attack modes, or maybe it's based on anomalous processes, or maybe it's based on a signature of attack code, flags the detection, someone says, yes, that's bad, it becomes an incident. But that's not enough, because there's other places we need to catch attackers, particularly in this SaaS world we're in now. If all you're doing is MDR and someone steals your credential, your password, they get access to your account, and they go and log into a piece of SaaS, that MDR system is never going to pick it up, never ever, because it's only looking at the genuine user's computer. Meanwhile, we've got an attacker someplace else accessing the user's data via SaaS. So where XDR comes into play is to cover that whole, and the reason X just means everywhere, everything, all the things. That's all it really means, which is a funny definition, because no XDR system I've ever seen actually monitors all the things, but it goes beyond the endpoint, right? So ideally, it's taking logs in from places like Office 365, maybe Amazon, maybe it's getting them from Salesforce, right? Slack. Right? It's taking in and from the MDR tool. Maybe it's monitoring traffic over a network, right? It's taking data from a lot of different places and collating that and trying to determine what's an anomalous access pattern or behavior pattern and what's not. Now, XDR is much harder than MDR. And it's because the data is not normalized. In MDR world, you only have 3 operating systems to deal with. It's Mac, Windows, or Linux, right? And basically, the things that happen on those operating systems are exactly the same. You're opening a file or you're not opening a file. You're running a piece of code or you're not running a piece of code, right? Out in the world of all of technology where you've got a lot of SaaS, et cetera, traffic flowing over the network is way different in qualitative data from a telemetry perspective than watching out who's sending mail in someone's mailbox, right? So, to do XDR properly, what's required is 2 things. And this is going to sound familiar, a way to collect the detections, right? How do we get out to stream all those insights into one place? This is where the value in an XDR system is. I already know how to absorb data from X, Y, or Z, right? And then there's a human element where they actually interpret that, and people love to sprinkle AI on top because it makes it sound like you don't need humans, but the reality is you need humans. And
it's true.
Detect those anomalies that way. Now, none of this is any different than we've been doing in security for the last 20 years. The word SOC, Security Operations Center, SIM, Security Information and Event Management, it's been around a long time. SOC and SIM is the way people did this until recently when products came prepackaged to do this. And in SIM world, the idea is you have a giant log database like a Splunk or Elastic, or IBM's got their other solutions out there.
In my sim world, I built like a little house for myself.
Yeah. And then you hire a bunch of engineers that figure out how to like fling their logs into this place. And then you hire a bunch of analysts to figure out how to analyze the logs. And it's so costly to develop this for each enterprise that most companies can't afford it. Yeah. They can't afford to do it right, that's for sure.
I want to add to your definition of XDR, because you're totally right. Gathering that telemetry from various sources, various devices, etc., and being able to ingest all of that and normalize it into a product is a huge feature of an XDR tool. But one thing I don't think we've hit on yet is the fact that threat intelligence, threat hunting capabilities, those are ideally also incorporated into a good XDR tool. The way I look at XDR is it's a consolidation of security tools and products behind one pane of glass. Depending on your vendor, they'll pick and choose which tools they want to consolidate behind that pane of glass. But that's how that's like my quick.
You're absolutely right, and I didn't crack open the box to say what happens in the magic box, but yes, you have people trained in how to recognize attack patterns, but they're not just depending on their own intelligence staring at like a stream of data, right? Yeah. They do have the ability to understand, well, what's a flagged likely, and this is where AI can get involved right now because it's getting data from threat feeds, right? Or we've seen this attack over here and we've recorded that and we know that's an attack. So when we see it again, we can recognize it more quickly.
Is this what Neo was looking at?
Like Neo from the Matrix?
Yes.
Yeah.
The Matrix.
I love. I'm gonna go back after this and I'm gonna watch exactly how many seconds.
So let me tell you, I've seen a lot of. I've never had the. It's sort of a bummer of a job to be a threat analyst because you're just staring at like.
It's tough.
Some people love it. Okay.
It's true.
You're on the hunt. I don't love it. I love talking to people. You are staring at boring log streams all day. It doesn't look nearly as cool as what Neo was looking at. However, I will say that most product vendors that build these interfaces for analysts to work on all day, they do make concessions to it. Well, it's got to look cool. So it does oftentimes look cool as well.
And I think, Zach, to give you a little bit more context, and I think maybe the end user as well, I think the difference between these, we're talking EDR, endpoint detection and response, MDR, managed detection and response, and XDR, extended detection and response. I think the difference between the three is really the scope and visibility. I think 10, 15 years ago, we started out with EDR, going to the endpoint and creating anti-malware, antivirus. And I think since then, that managed detection and response is having that person behind it, not just letting it run, but actually actively remediating the alerts that come to that EDR. And I think that's where we get MDR. And I think the difference between MDR and XDR is really that scope and visibility. You're getting the network, you're getting identity, you're getting documents and data, as well as that endpoint detection and response. And XDR, I typically think of as a tool rather than MDR, which I think is more of a service in combination with a tool. That's kind of how we see that.
I agree. And I think MDR, like that, the keyword there is it's managed disaster and response. And so you could stick anything. If you're really doing MDR properly, right, it can encompass a lot of things, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so the details matter of exactly what's happening in that MDR box, right? And you can't shop for that kind of thing based on like endpoint cost. You've got to look at, well, what exactly is the MDR service that I'm selling to my end customer?
What are their capabilities?
That's a great way to describe it. I get it now. Describing like I'm imagining Alfredo's Pizza Cafe and Pizza by Alfredo, and one of them's worth a lot more.
It's a good analogy.
I'm good at tech analogies into
being marketing.
Nonsense.
So Ryan brought this comment to my attention here. Very interesting to see XDR development as the attack surface and capabilities change. I think, I'm not sure that the word XDR is going to survive the next few years, but I think that you're right that this is still greenfield right here. These XDRs are not. We're early stages at systems. People have been selling stuff to do this for a while, for the last few years, but they haven't worked effectively yet. It's still really difficult, right? This is an active space, right? And the solutions that are out there in the market aren't perfect yet, and we have to continue to develop this.
Yeah, a lot of those tools are based on legacy technologies as well. So you find that you get an XDR tool, but it's only if it's a certain stack of technologies. If it's only within their house, you have to buy the entire company's tools to be able to use their XDR, which is what we're seeing now. And I think Gartner, I think we're in the trough of disillusionment with XDR and Gartner currently.
I agree.
So I think
Zach, anything to...
I'm sorry.
You want to jump in, Zach, before we
cover
MGM?
You're giving me a bunch of good stuff. I love the Gartner curve. Every time it ever gets, I learned about it like a month or two ago, and
the Dunning-Kruger curve. Yeah.
Anytime I ever hear about it, I get jazzed up. But before we get too far away from XDR, I wanted to ask one question. So it's extended. How do you determine the length of that extendedness?
There's no definition yet in the industry.
Yep.
So it's just extended.
Well, let me back up. These security frameworks out there, like NIST, like CIS to some extent, they actually are very specific, and it's long been decided already what should be done there. Back from the days of SOC and SIM, what has not been decided is which part belongs to the product ecosystem and which part belongs to the human people ecosystem. That line in the sand of what is product and what is human has not been decided. So one thing to understand is we can't let the software vendors, the product, and I'm a product vendor. This whole crew is product vendors, right?
We can't let what's happening happen. No, I'm just
it's not our job. It's not our job to define what the security goals and outcomes should be, right? The customers define the outcomes from a technical perspective. The security goals, like how to define controls. This has been done by really smart people and not product people, by people that understand the science of security and what's possible right now.
And
they've already defined it. Yes, they've already defined it. As product vendors, we bring as much to the table as possible so that we can make the best use of security dollars, right? And so if there's a repetitive task that would be better in software, that's what a product vendor should do. But you can't just take an XDR product off the shelf and expect that it's going to do all of the things that you should be doing in detect and response. It's just not possible right now, and it's unlikely to be possible in the next 10 years. I don't know if it ever will be.
Yes, yes, Zach.
It seems like, and I know we touched on it a little already. It seems like AI should get really good at the M.
The problem with AI, I unfortunately I think the downside to AI is probably better than the upside in this space. Unfortunately, AI can probably outsmart humans to some extent on the attack front, easier than it can defend. The problem is, no matter what AI we develop, these are all expert systems. They're trained to stop a known attack pattern, or an attack pattern that's sort of like another known attack
Their
pattern.
knowledge is based off of existing knowledge.
Yeah, and
any new attack is going to be a surprise to them.
And that's been the situation in the security world for the last 20 years. Is there's attackers out there that their whole job is to find new methods of attack, and so AI can help sifting the data, but it's not solving the problem, and it's not looking like it will in the near term.
It's
AI
not
is not that
solving
smart.
the problem. I wouldn't say it's solving the problem, so to speak, but it's certainly assisting, because AI plays a role not just from the security perspective, but like you were saying, Matt, or maybe it was Zach who mentioned that AI might be leveraged by hackers in the future to actually develop new and advanced threats. So if we can have that AI that's learning also in our tools, it can provide or it can augment existing efforts that are human led, for example. So
it's definitely a valuable tool in the box.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that I think the AI and the point of XDR is really to handle a lot of the managed things that are being done manually through MDR. So that correlation and that enrichment of an alert in let's say a SIM by a SOC analyst is really, in that investigation engineering, is really what takes a lot of the time out of an analyst's day-to-day cycle.
The grind of it.
Enriching alerts, saying okay, who did this, hopping from vendor to vendor, from screen to screen. And I think XDR, that goal is also to to automate and utilize AI in the way that it's enriching and correlating that data, so the analyst has an actionable insight automatically, rather than going through their logs of however
having to do the math.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. We only have 15 minutes left, right?
I was about to say the same thing.
Do we want to dive into the MGM hack?
Yeah, and I just I think we beat AI to death here, though I see some AI questions.
Poor AI.
Let's cover MGM. So we're only a few weeks out, right? It was about a month ago that the whole world learned of this thing that happened at MGM, and it took down most of their customer-facing systems for a period of time.
Can I pause you, Matt?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So
customer-facing systems from a major casino, but also a hotel. So what does that encompass?
So every business has their critical systems and their not so critical systems. And in a large business, they have huge collections of systems. And so they have many critical systems and many not critical systems. In MGM's case, MGM Resorts, any system that touched the public was deemed critical.
So you're telling me I couldn't yank that slot machine?
Yeah, you could not yank the slot machine. And any system not visible to the public was not public facing, non-critical. The attackers got away with all the data. Okay, so let's just start there.
Let me ask another stupid question.
Yeah, go ahead.
As I'm just rifling them out here, as long as I'm interrupting you freely. Is there data around what's going on with the machines and what probabilities are and that type of thing, or is that just
you mean an MGM specific case?
With that data? Yeah, I don't know if necessarily, but is that possible?
So the attackers didn't get all of the data. Let me just say that, but they did get a lot of. I did say all the data. They got a lot of really important data. Okay, I understand that they were not able to actually hack the slot machines. But MGM, when they went to go clean things up, decided we really need to sanitize, right? And so they took the slot machines down. They took a lot of systems down. So their virtual infrastructure, which was it's in a physical data center, running on VMware's ESX product. The hackers actually got into their core infrastructure, the systems that run the systems that run the systems, right? And they basically crypto locked those core, like basically the whole data center, right?
What is crypto lock? Just
So
again,
they
what is it?
encrypted the machine. They encrypted the data on the machines. They could have just deleted the data, but they decided to encrypt the data because they wanted to ransom MGM, and they wanted MGM to pay the ransom. And so the idea behind crypto locking is that you encrypt the data, which doesn't destroy it, and you offer to decrypt it if a ransom is paid.
Right.
Of course, the decrypting is problematic because you pay the ransom, and how do you know that they're really going to decrypt the data? How do you know that after they decrypt the data, they're not going to re-encrypt it? They're not going to like leak it, you know?
Yeah.
So it's
Sell it.
difficult. Although I will tell you, these large unfortunately, the reputation of these large firms, while it's they have a horrible reputation because they cause a lot of economic impact and damage, right? They tend to pay out on the ransoms, and they tend to do exactly what they say they're going to do. They operate like any other type of business, right? They've got customer service lines, they've got ticketing agents, they've got payment processing systems. In MGM's case, the systems were down for nearly 10 days. The public-facing systems, reservations, the ability they went back to a paper system on the floor of the casino, which I don't even know how they did that, but they shut down all the electronic gambling systems, and there was tens of millions of dollars of impact.
Poker. It got to be more than tens of millions. It's got.
Yeah, I think the breach.
Go ahead, or
one
of you guys. You guys can both.
Sorry, Hadyn might be already heading this way, so this could be perfect.
Try doing every other word.
we're so in sync sometimes, it's damn near that.
Can we quickly touch on how this whole thing started?
Sure.
I mean, based on my research, it looks like it was some social engineering that took place for a really high level administrative account.
So, like many cybercrime gangs these days, the organization responsible for this attack operated as part of a network of businesses. They have their own supply chain, they have their own vendors, they go jointly into the market. And there was two.
Every time you describe this, it's crazy to me. I'm imagining me, but like the bad version that's like also sitting at their desk and they're looking at their Google Calendar like, oh, all right, we've got some crimes, like it's just.
And they're like reportedly to be like all 19, like early 20-year-olds.
There's a lot of rumors going on around about this specific cybercrime gang that was ultimately responsible. However, the intelligence that's out there is not high quality, so I'm not sure how much of it is real rumors, fake rumors. This specific cybercrime gang has a high fluency in English. They are responsible for a lot of social engineering attacks, phishing attacks. So mostly by phone, not by email. So they research their targets, and they pretext. They use that information to collect more information, and then they use that information to then try to get someone, in this case, you're right, to give up an administrative credential. And that's what happened. But that wasn't the only thing that happened, because in an attack like this, from an attacker's perspective, multiple things have to go right in chain. From the MGM's perspective, multiple failures had to happen. That team is really good at that social engineering stuff, but they are not as geeky as you would think. And so they have their joint market partners that build cybercrimeware as a service software, a SaaS company that delivers the attack. Not only like they're like, okay, here's the account. They get the account, they get access to the administrative account, they hand it off, they ship it off to their business partner, who then gets access, implants the malware, tries to like get around the network. And so there was two organizations working in concert here, and this is not unusual. And actually, it's interesting because the story you get about how the attack went down, if you look at the information and the interviews with each of these organizations, that, by the way, I respond to interview requests from reporters, they they actually report a different story. So they don't
Right.
even agree between each other on the story on what happened. But they both were involved, and they both got coverage, and they got to get their brand out there, and so MGM was attacked, and the interesting thing here is MGM detected the attack and started the recovery processes before the attackers actually got around to demanding a ransom.
Right.
So that's not always the case, and I think it's good for MGM because had they not been so proactive, the attackers probably could have made it more difficult to recover. Right. But
I think Caesars
MGM
saw that like the week prior.
Yeah, because MGM was proactive in containment, they were able to recover. And I think if they had not been so proactive in detecting and reporting and initiating their plans, they might not have been able to recover, and they may have paid the ransom. In fact, what the CEO says was, well, they didn't ransom us when we detected it, so we just started restoration operations. And when the ransom finally came in, they were like, oh, we're already doing the thing,
Yeah, we're
guys.
okay,
Like, it's too
buddy.
late.
Yeah.
Although that's a statement from the CEO, and it's not clear what actually happened because while MGM did make some statements, they weren't forthcoming in the details.
Yeah.
And so we don't really know what happened inside the MGM box.
Would you expect like complete and total transparency from an organization in the event of a breach, or does it make sense for security purposes that they're keeping their details close to the chest?
I think it depends on the organization. MGM, they're a resort company, but their major revenue streams are gambling, casino based, and security is really important, and obscurity is really
They know
important.
something about risk already.
Yeah, they've clearly made the calculated decision that they want to be transparent.
With MGM either.
They want to be transparent, but they don't really want to be giving away information that they don't have to be. Other organizations that don't have as high security considerations aren't protecting their intellectual property to the same extent. They will oftentimes disclose more. And I think what's important here is that MGM took it seriously. They declared the incident on time. They communicated to the public on time. They were consistent about what information they reported to the public. They said, look, we were owned. They got everything. It's basically what they said. And that was true. So they weren't caught out in a lie. They didn't try to downplay or underreport, right? And their investment disclosure said they think there's going to be $100 million impact. Although I understand that so far we're in the tens of millions. I think that's the estimate of the ultimate impact. So we will see where they actually land. Probably in their next quarterly, we'll see a more accurate number.
Is MGM the hotel that houses DEF CON?
No. But the irony is that Caesars is. And Caesars may have, although it's not very clear, may have fallen victim to the same attack pattern, same crew within a few weeks of MGM. But MGM is the hotel from Ocean's 11, so there's that.
There's that.
I knew we were watching movies.
Yeah. Speaking of robbery and crime.
All right, so we're almost out of time. Do you guys have other MGM questions? Should we do quick plugs?
We could do quick plugs. I don't have any questions. Hadyn, do you?
No, I think
I have infinite questions, so we don't have enough time for mine.
All right.
You're just a curious cat, Zach.
Well, tell us. You guys are working in this space, so tell us what's exciting right now.
In the XDR space, or just in the cybersecurity space?
Any space you want to talk about.
This is your space, for space.
Okay. Well, really exciting. Sainik is developing their own XDR product and platform. We won't have a ton to release during this call, but we do have some major updates coming out in the next month or so. So keep an eye out on our LinkedIn profile and our website for those details. But we were talking about the normalization of data and telemetry data across those different silos, products, and tool sets. Our XDR really does aim to normalize all of that telemetry data, provide analysts with actionable pre-enriched alerts that allow them to respond to threats quickly and efficiently, instead of having to do a ton of investigative work in order to figure out how to respond effectively. So that's pretty cool about our product. Again, we have more information coming out soon, so I don't want to spill the beans too early.
Great. So that's a important. We had a question or an observation earlier about the development of XDR systems, and clearly it's an active space. You guys are right of boom. At Fort Mesa here, we're left of boom. So we help organizations design their security plan. We help service providers deliver that to the end customer, use it to right-size customers into the right service delivery package. And then we work through project plan, implementation, remediation over periods of time to get someone compliant or in line with an overall security destination. And then, of course, we're collecting evidence along the way, and so we can help them prove it to auditors. So that's Fort Mesa. We love the channel, so if there's service providers out there, feel free to say hi. I think that's it. You want to ring us out, Zach?
Hadyn, do you want to say you want space for anything? Doesn't have to be cybersecurity exciting, but say a little something.
My brain is always on cybersecurity. So yeah, I just wanted to make the note that I think we're all a part of the cybersecurity space, that the underlying goal of all of our varying products, and I think there's so many in the cybersecurity space specifically with so many acronyms, as you can tell by our discussion earlier. I think it just really, all of these services and tools all just aim to create a more robust and holistic cybersecurity program for companies.
Awesome. Well, I think that's it for this Friday. Thank you so much to everybody for joining us. If you haven't already, check out our YouTube, like us on LinkedIn for more content. Looks like next week we have Connor from Fin Security joining us. That's going to be a great conversation. I imagine we'll talk a little bit about security training. It looks like we're going to talk about compliance in the sale process. So that'll be great. Join us next week, and enjoy fall. Matt, it looks like you had something you wanted to say.
Nope, I'm just enjoying fall. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Happy Friday.